I am Louise. I'm doing the next TED Talk. I am a PhD student up in Newcastle, and I have the unfortunate pleasure of looking at earthquakes, looking at reconstruction after earthquakes. So I've looked a lot about disasters, and so that's what we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, looking at why they happen, where does God fit into that, how can we answer some of those big questions, and then what role we have to play. So, if you cast your minds back, 25th of April 2017, the UK was hit by a disaster. It was a nightmare. We were running out of hummus. What are we going to do? What am I going to have for lunch? I have lunch every day, sometimes. What's going to go with my pita bread? What am I going to go? All my lonely carrot sticks with nothing to go in them. Not the only disaster. Lettuce shortage. We were limited to 3 lettuces per shop. I've never bought 3 lettuces in one go. Don't know how that's going to work. Sunderland firefighters had to rescue a duck from a lake. I think they live in lakes, but we'll go with it. My favourite headline I found, a castle was under attack from pigeons. There we go. So yeah, lots of different disasters. And it's good journalism, blowing things out of proportion, big dramatic headlines. But it kind of maybe puts things out of perspective. So hopefully, if my video doesn't work, oh no, filling time. You might have heard of the Twitter craze first world problems.
I hate when my phone charger won't reach my bed.
I hate when my little seats aren't heated.
When I go to the bathroom and I forget my phone.
Le mette radio dans machine à laver, yo commence à sentir.
I hate it when my house is so big. I need 2 wireless washers.
When my gun makes my hot water taste too cold.
When I have to write my maid a check, but I forget her last name.
M'pa ka écrit message devant marcher en même temps.
Moi te quitté casse-moi en bas.
Moi raï les voisins à bloquer internet là.
I hate it when I tell them no pickles and they still give me pickles.
So yeah, that hopefully just puts things into perspective. And I'm not going to say that just because somebody else is maybe suffering worse, that doesn't mean that our suffering isn't valid, because that's a really unhealthy way to think. But some of those tweets, that first world problems, can just start to maybe make us realise what conditions, what disasters are affecting other people. So hopefully, if that goes on to the next slide. I love technology. We will get to there we go. That is not the right slide. Gonna have a preview of all the slides to come. So these are some of the headlines I pulled out from other news. So it is really easy to find those over-dramatic headlines, out of lettuce, needing to rescue ducks from lakes. But it's also really easy to find, and it seems like more and more when we look in the papers, read the news, see the news online, that more and more disasters are happening around the world, whether that's earthquakes, tsunamis, got the Nepal earthquake, the Haiti earthquake from 2010, the tsunami back in 2004, and just numbers that we can't even begin to comprehend. About 250,000 people died in the 2004 tsunami, about 200,000 in Haiti. Nepal was about 9,000, and then you've got famine, starvation, refugees, and numbers that just, where do we begin to comprehend what those numbers are and what they look like? And it's hard enough from any perspective to see those things and situations that we can't understand. But then as a Christian, how does that work? How do we find God in those numbers and that hurt and that pain? Because if our God is a loving God, why does he let these things happen? My understanding is that God created the universe. God created this wonderful world that we live in. He planned it all, so why does he allow some of these things, especially the natural disasters, to happen? So I started to ask him those questions, and I started to ask some of those questions in a lecture I had about 5 years ago now. My lecturer, who gave this lecture, goes out to places after they've had earthquakes, looks at the buildings, looks at why they failed, and starts to spot patterns in that. And he had these two pictures from Sri Lanka back in 2004, after that tsunami that I mentioned. And I saw these two pictures and I just got stuck. I just couldn't get past this point. The guy on the left, that square of concrete that you can see, that was all that remained of his house. This kind of timber shack that he was living in had just got completely wiped out. About 1 kilometre down the road was the picture on the right, this hotel that was designed for tourists doing lots of diving. This is picture on the right. People are going to be there, 2 weeks when they're on holiday, have a nice time. That hotel had a few windows broken probably, no real major damage. And I just couldn't understand how we lived in a world where that was the case. How was it fair that this guy on the left, whose entire life had been wiped away, was next to this hotel that was fine? Why was your wealth affecting how you're affected by those disasters? Having got onto this journey of looking at disasters, looking at earthquakes, I've got to go out to quite a few cool places, but that's also meant that I've seen some pretty hard things to see. These are some of the pictures that I've taken on my travels from Nepal and in Haiti. Kind of rundown, destroyed buildings, like rebuilt shacks with whatever material you can find. This picture in the middle was a town in Nepal. The entire town had been completely washed away by a landslide, and they just relocated up the hill, and there wasn't really a brick in sight in this place. It was all just corrugated metal, tarpaulins and things like that. And I couldn't understand how a loving God was letting this happen, and where was God in all of this hurt and this pain and this devastation. And then over time I started to see this. So these horrible places in horrendous living conditions are set in these places where you get beautiful beaches and idyllic Caribbean islands, the Himalayas, the top middle picture is Everest. You get these beautiful, stunning mountains. And just in a physical space sense, I started to see the paradise in that pain and that hurt. And not just in the scenery, but also in the people. So the people I met, if you were here for Craig's talk, Craig touched on it as well, some of the most loving, generous, kind, hospitable people. And they had nothing. They were living, there was a family I was with in Nepal, and they were living in where they used to keep their animals because their house had been destroyed. And they were living where their animals had lived, yet they kept inviting me in for tea. And how did that work? They were like telling me to use their shower and things like that. And it just blew my mind that even where they didn't have anything or very much, they were still willing to give so much, in that kind of sense of paradise. And then you also get, there's stories all the time of people opening up their homes, if their homes are still standing, setting up soup kitchens and giving as much as they can. And suddenly your wealth, your status, your job, none of that matters because you're all in the same boat. You're all stuck in this place of, we've been hit by this terrible thing. We all now need to pull together and we all need to work. whether that's youth groups in Haiti putting together emergency packs, whether that's a lot of people in Nepal were volunteering to, a lot of times, putting their lives at risk slightly to help rescue operations after the earthquake, and all these stories that just come out of people coming together, communities being more closely knit. And my understanding of God is that that's what community should be like, and starting to see that glimpse of paradise where what you do, and it's not about who you are and what you've earned, that actually we're all equal and we all should come together. So we will briefly pop to the Bible. These are verses from Matthew's Gospel for the crucifixion and the resurrection, both of which mention an earthquake. So there are reports that as Jesus died on the cross, the ground was shaking as the curtain was split in two. And then again, Matthew's Gospel tells the story that the earthquake had helped roll the stone away to reveal the empty tomb. And there's a lot of examples of earthquakes and disasters in the Bible, Noah and all that kind of thing. But these two particularly, as I started to look more at that kind of idea of paradise after an earthquake or a disaster, that if crucifixion and resurrection aren't an idea of paradise for us, what is? So after Jesus died, that sense of complete loss, his disciples, his followers had lost their king, they didn't know what was happening, there was so much grief and pain. And then at resurrection, when the tomb was revealed, that actually that's when we are saved. For Christians, that is our paradise, that we have grace, and it's not about what we do, but we all get this invitation to be in community and be in relationship with God. So that's all lovely, but the UK doesn't necessarily have some of those earlier pictures of those horrendous living conditions, as you might say. But what does that mean for us? What can we do? That I couldn't sit back and do nothing about some of the stories and the things that I'd heard. So we don't have those big headlines that hit the news around the world, but we still have our own disasters. Grenfell, we've got Manchester up there. A lot of storms and a lot of flooding in the last few years is getting worse. We've got food banks, we've got a lot of cyberbullying, a lot of problems in our communities where they're not working as they should be. This bottom story, some of you might have heard of a girl called Tilly Smith. Tilly Smith was a 10-year-old girl who was on holiday in Thailand in 2004 when the tsunami struck. Her and her family were on the beach, having a nice day, and then a few weeks before, the stories say that she had been learning about tsunamis in her geography lessons. They'd seen some videos, and she looked out to the sea and started seeing that it was behaving in how the same way that she'd seen in those videos. The sea was bubbling and fizzing, it's called. And then, so she told her parents, and her parents were like, okay, what's she on about? Carry on. But she was adamant that this was a sign of a tsunami. She told her family that we have to get off the beach. So they went and found a lifeguard, told the lifeguard, and so eventually she got, because of her one action and her spotting this thing, that she meant, or that action led to hundreds of people on that beach being saved. This isn't just a plug to listen in your geography lessons, although feel free to go ahead. But actually just a really small, beautiful example of one tiny little thing leading to a really good story of hope from that day of just absolute devastation. So it starts to ask those questions of what are the situations in our communities that we can't fix. I don't think any of us in this room potentially, or maybe we can, dream big, but single-handedly we can't fix the fact that this country's got such a need to use food banks. But actually, can we give a little bit to food banks? Can we help support that while that need is still there? Especially in schools particularly, bullying and things like that. What role can we play in those situations? This talk was titled, Being a Good Neighbour When Your Neighbourhood Has Been Destroyed. So what are those things in your neighbourhoods, in your context, whether that's school or work or on your street, in your home? What in your situations and your neighbourhoods is destroying them? What is causing that pain and that hurt? And the bigger question is, what can you do about it? If you want to chat for 5-10 minutes in your groups, any comments you want to shout out, and we will have a chat about what you can do in your neighbourhoods to bring a little bit more of God into those places and be a light in some of those darker situations.